Hi guys, and welcome to this Sunday morning tribe video. I hope you've all had a really good week, and as usual we're going to start with a little bit of worship. So pause the video and then go over to our playlist, which has been updated with a few new songs, and then just spend a moment to reflect and in worship, just spend some time with God before we crack on with today's video. So pause, and then in a second we'll play the video again. Brilliant. So today's topic, we're going to be talking a little bit about Elisha. But first of all, I don't know if you've ever been the same as me here, where God has done so much for me in my life, and I've told many stories on these vlogs that I do about all the amazing things that God has done for me and the amazing situation that He's pulled me through, and some situations that have looked quite dark and quite difficult, but actually God has pulled me through those situations in amazing ways. And yet, when I approach a new situation, I so often forget all of that. And it's easy to forget when everything's going well, but then you're faced with a really difficult situation, and all of a sudden you feel very alone, and you feel like you can't face it, and you forget everything that God's done for you, and you forget who's on your side. Now, this is a little bit what happens in the story I'm about to read about Elisha and his servant, where they're faced with a situation which looks pretty dire. So Elisha has been helping the Israelite army. He's been like almost God's messenger to the Israelite army, and he's been giving them advice from God on the battles, and this has really riled up the enemies. They've seen this and they've recognised that he's giving away details about their army without possibly being able to know those things, and they get really annoyed by this, so they send people to kill Elisha. So this is where the city with that Elisha's in has been surrounded by the armies, and his servant comes out. So it says, when the servant of the man of God got up early the next morning and went outside, there were troops, horses, and chariots everywhere. "Sir, what will we do now?" the young man cried to Elisha. Do not be afraid," Elisha told him, "for there are more on our side than on theirs." Now here, he's come out, and when he looks out across the city, all he can see is hundreds and hundreds of chariots and horses and soldiers facing the city. And it looks really dire because they don't have any of that. And at this point, around them, they're massively outnumbered here. And he says to Elisha, "What are we going to do now?" He's in a situation where he's been around Elisha, where amazing things have happened, and yet in this moment, he's gone, what do we do? He's looking at the earthly numbers and not remembering the power that God has. And the next thing that Elisha says is, "Do not be afraid, for the people on our side outnumber the people on their side." And I imagine at this point, this guy's like, what? Like, he's actually gone mad, because are you not seeing this army that's facing us? And the next bit, Elisha says, "So, do not be afraid, for there are more on our side than on theirs." Then Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes and let him see." The Lord opened the young man's eyes, and when he looked up, he saw that the hillside around Elisha was filled with horses and chariots of fire. And I think, what an amazing thing to see, first of all. But this man, this servant, came to Elisha fearful because he saw what was facing them. And Elisha was dead calm and said, "Don't be afraid," because Elisha knew what was on his side. So for us, whenever we're facing something that is looking very difficult, or you're in a situation where you feel lonely, or you're like, "I can't do this," first of all, remember what God's done for you. Remember in those moments the amazing things that God has done, and the situations in the past that He's pulled you through in miraculous ways. But more than anything, if you're struggling to see past a situation, or you're struggling to see how you can get through a situation, then pray. But specifically pray the prayer that Elisha prayed. Pray that your eyes would be opened and that God would reveal to you what and who we have on our side. Because what's interesting about this is, you could see that and go, "Oh, well, God's got it. Look at the army God's got. I can sit back and I can just have a cup of tea while God sorts this army out. But Elisha sees what he has on his side and sees God's army that he's fighting with, and that spurs him on to do something and to continue what he's called to do. So use this and pray that God would open our eyes and reveal what we have on our side, and reveal what God can do through us. Not so we can stop and go, okay, I'm saved, God's got it, but so that we can push forwards, and we can be active in our faith.